Nepal is not what I expected. I don't know. I think I expected destroyed cities and people who've given up. That's kind of what I was thinking. If only I knew what I was getting myself into. I knew the trek was going to be hard. I've been told that 1,000 times. And then we began the actual trek, going straight up 1,000 meters for 10 hours. And on the first day, that was the hardest day of my life. But something changed the first day of trekking. It went from a mindset of, I literally can't do this, to bring it on. Every day we had to walk to the place where we were going to sleep, if we didn't want to sleep under the freezing cold open sky. So whether it took us 3 or 13 hours to get there, we just continued on. After a while, I just loved it. It's crazy what you love after you get used to it. We slept in homes along the way. Sometimes we'd get to sleep in beds, which really just meant wooden planks with a blanket on it. Sometimes we'd just get a room where all 12 of us had to fit into, and other times it was just a shed. I know it might not sound like something you would choose voluntarily, but I actually really miss it. After a while, everything became comfortable. Lunch and dinner was usually called dal bhat, dal meaning lentil soup and bhat meaning rice. Sometimes we'd get potatoes with it, but it's what we had, every day. Other than that, we often had something called snacks, which basically meant food with no rice, a bowl of beans with a type of bread called roti to go with it. It was definitely my favorite. The bigger villages offered more fancy food, like samosas and momos. I really don't know how to explain it, but it had no rice, so it was basically the best thing any of us had tasted in a while. What I miss the most, though, is definitely the people. I honestly think they're the most beautiful people I've ever met. It's like you're looking at a picture, but then you realize they're standing right there in front of you. There's something so special about them. They've got so much joy in their eyes. There's a special light about them. I'll always remember those faces. Most of our ministry time were open airs, sharing the gospel and our testimonies, and asking if people wanted prayer. It's crazy how normal it became, to share something you've literally used 5 seconds to come up with, but they listened, and God said what He wanted to say. They'd usually never admit that they needed prayer, but we'd always seem to find someone who needed healing after a little digging. One time, in a part of Nepal called Mugu, we walked over to a woman to talk to her. She told us that her stomach was in pain, so we prayed for her. 3 times we prayed, and the pain disappeared. It was amazing to see God reveal Himself to people who had never heard His name until that day. There was a total of 14 healings, and that was only one day of many like it. After 5 weeks of trekking, we returned to Kathmandu. I never thought I'd say this, but I really missed the traffic. Because of the blockage from India's borders, there was a huge gas shortage in Nepal. The lines to the gas station were about 3 kilometers long. We did a lot of the same things in Kathmandu as we did in the villages. One of the best days was standing in a busy Nepali bus stop, just talking to people that stopped to listen to our worship. Who knew simple conversations could lead to 3 salvations and a bunch of healings in the middle of the street? It's a day I'll never forget. We spent the last 2 weeks trekking in the mountains again, but this time we were way closer to Kathmandu. We got to build houses for future tourists to stay in as they trek through the villages. With this new income, they no longer needed to sell the young girls into trafficking. It was amazing to see such a tangible change. I thought I was going into a country of ruins, but Nepal is so much more. I have to say, this is really the hardest thing I've ever had to do. But the things I've seen and experienced of my God can't be compared to anything I've ever seen before. I traveled to the other side of the world to change Nepal, but the truth is, Nepal changed me more. I guess you could say that God changed us both. How then can they call on the one they have not believed in? And how can they believe in the one whom they have not heard? And how can they hear without someone preaching to them? And how can anyone preach unless they are sent? As it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news. Romans 10.